Hello, Wes.
Hello, Val.
How are you?
I'm wonderful on this Friday morning.
Amazing. And hello to our audience. Welcome back to the exchange. Today we have with us Wes Lambert, the CEO of Australian Restaurant and Cafe Association.
That's it.
What a great title, CEO of Restaurant and Cafe Association. How did you start it?
Oh, that is a great question. I have been a lobbyist in Australia for coming on 7 years now, after decades in industry. And I originally was the CEO of Restaurant and Catering Australia. And after COVID and a bit of burnout, I spent 2 years back in industry. And the industry called me back into advocating as a stronger voice to advocate for the needs of restaurants and cafes throughout Australia.
Yeah. Someone in particular called you?
Oh, that's a great question. The industry called me.
The industry. Okay, we'll
Yes.
probably will need to get back to it a bit later.
Okay.
All right. Look, you have a huge experience in the industry and hospitality over 20 years. Do you mind going back to actually maybe your childhood? And you can share with us where you're coming from because you were not born in Australia. Is it right?
No, I am a naturalized citizen of Australia. I've lived in 36 cities in 5 countries. I was born in North Florida. My family is from South Georgia, but it was the closest hospital to where we lived. And I lived throughout the United States with my mother. My parents were divorced. And primarily in Texas and Georgia. And, I had a typical childhood. And I got into hospitality as a young man. I faked an ID when I was 14.
Okay.
Yes, to show that I was 15 so that I could work in a Wendy's fast food restaurant in San Antonio, Texas. And after that, and I waited tables through high school and in university. And then when I had graduated from university, I started working for an investment bank in restaurant capital. And the story begins there.
Okay.
And,
What did you study exactly?
finance. I studied finance. Yeah.
And working part-time in hospitality.
I worked part-time in lots of businesses in retail and hospitality. And then as I got closer to my degree in finance.
Yeah. You mentioned that you had a typical childhood. What does a typical childhood look like in the States?
Well, I'm Generation X, so I was a latchkey kid. So, you have a key around your neck and you basically just wander the neighborhoods until, 6 p.m. and come home for dinner. So,
Okay.
I was drinking out of water hoses and riding my bike through the woods and just being an outside kid.
Okay. For some reason, I thought you would say until 6 a.m. in the morning.
No,
Not as wild.
no, not that wild.
Yeah, okay. And then you end up finishing your degree, end up working in the finance, but still your passion lied deeply with hospitality.
Well, I didn't know. I didn't know how deeply in hospitality it was rooted until I was given an opportunity to manage and then own nightclubs in Atlanta. And that really stoked the true passion, which for me is hospitality, which I then did for basically the rest of my career.
Yeah. How different are nightclubs in the States to compare it to Australian nightclubs?
Ooh, less regulation. So they're just as hard to open, but once you're operating them, there's much less regulations in place, or at least there was at that time. And from what I can tell, the profit margins are much better.
Yeah. What about the service? Service is better over there?
Well, the US is primarily a tipping culture, and the minimum wages for hospitality employees, which are the standard, come with a significant amount of gratuities, which are 10 to 30% in nightclubs.
Yeah. Is it something you would lobby here in Australia?
I think that tips in Australia are an ever-present and growing thing. There's a myth that Australia is not a tipping culture. It is a tipping culture. It is just not as much a percentage as it is in North America or in Europe or the UK.
Yeah. But do you think it's because people in Australia understand the minimum wage in hospitality is relatively high and they don't really feel bad for the workers? That's why they don't tip. Where in the States, people comprehend that the wage are too low and they feel sorry maybe for the staff, and that's why they're tipping.
I think that's a great policy position to talk about. However, when you're sitting in a restaurant at 8, 9, or 10 p.m. and finishing your meal, and the server hands you the credit card terminal, and the screen is there with a 5, 10, or 15% tip, I don't think you're processing how much per hour that server is making. You're just making an on-the-spot decision. And that on-the-spot decision, according to Zeller, a POS company, is increasing. And in 2024, the average tip per meal in Australia was $25 for a restaurant meal, which is about 7% tip, which is quite a lot.
And percentage-wise to the States?
That would be about half what the States is. So this is why we understand that the myth of Australians don't tip, or we're not a tipping culture. That's true in so much as we don't tip as much, but the percentage is skyrocketing.
Do you think we'll come to the time where the tips will be taxed?
Tips are taxed. So tips are taxable in Australia as income. I'm looking forward to the time where we come where tips are not taxable, where they're treated as windfalls, like lottery, like betting winnings, like gifts. Those aren't taxable. So we're looking forward to when that happens.
Okay. Is it something ARCA would lobby for?
We actually are lobbying for it. It was in our pre-budget submission to the government, and we're pushing both sides of both government and opposition to officially remove the tax on tips. We think it's an unfair tax.
What is the tax right now? Is it the same structure as your normal income tax?
Yeah, so it's self-declare. So tips are not on your pay stub. So they're not on your GRIP certificate each year. So you're responsible for claiming those as income.
Majority of the people don't do it.
I can't speak for the majority of people. All I can say is that it really is a gift. You do not go to work expecting to get a gratuity from a customer. So it's a windfall. It's not, while you have received it at your place of employment, it's still a gift. It's still voluntary.
Okay. Let's go back again to your career in finance. For how long you worked in finance?
Well, I actually had a full-time job for about a year and a half, working as a financial analyst in an Israeli software company that converted green screen to like a web page, so that businesses who had their data in the old green screen, like IBM and such, could then see that in a more dynamic and web-friendly way. And I was finishing up my degree at the time, but working full-time. And then as soon as I finished my degree, I went into investment banking for 2 years, which is the standard in the US.
Yeah. And that's when you started managing the nightclubs straight after, or there was a gap in between?
I was doing both. So I was working
simultaneously.
I was working 70 or 80 hours in investment banking in Atlanta. And I started off as the marketing manager of a medium-sized nightclub in Buckhead, Atlanta, and then became the GM. And I did that for about 9 months. And then I realized that I couldn't work 2 jobs, but also that I preferred industry more than I did the banking.
Yeah, wow. In the same time, did you have a personal life, or you didn't have time for that?
Well, I mean, running a nightclub is somewhat of a personal life. So I was able to interact with people, and there was some personal to that, but Sundays was pretty much the time where I had time off.
Yeah. How did you end up coming to Australia?
Oh, that's a great question. So after the first nightclub, then the second, which we built from the ground up, 10,000 square meters in 3 buildings on 1.4 acres of land. And we then sold that to our biggest competitor in 2006. And after a few weeks of realizing that I needed to take some time off to lose some weight and to recenter, I packed everything I wanted to carry with me into 6 Samsonite hard case suitcases. And I moved to Thailand. And when I got there, they let me in with 6 suitcases. And within 3 months, I had a non-immigrant B visa. I'd bought a pub and could stay there indefinitely, going on visa runs every 3 months. I got bored with that after a year and came to Australia. with the same six suitcases. They let me in. And within just a few months, I had a permanent residency application.
Yeah. Where did you stay in Thailand?
I actually stayed in Shillong in the southern part of Phuket Island.
Yeah, beautiful. I've been to Phuket last year. Amazing.
Very nice. I tried to stay away from Patong. The pub was in Phuket town, so it was more for backpackers that were arriving on the overnight bus, and then the expats that lived around Phuket town.
Was it challenging to run a nightclub there or a pub?
Not really. I mean, the dynamics are such that consumers were used to pub environment, so it made it very easy for us to get customers and to run the business.
Okay, Thailand was your space in between coming to Australia. After the Thailand, you moved to Australia?
Well, I was there for just over a year.
Yeah, and then Australia.
And then Australia with the same 6 suitcases. And I ran into a gentleman who wanted to restructure his growing restaurant group so that he could grow more. We turned Kingsley's Restaurant Group into Pacific Restaurant Group Limited, an unlisted public company with 100 shareholders. And we owned Kingsley's Steakhouses. We built Chop House on Bly Street.
Oh, wow.
And then I partnered with Jamie Oliver and brought Jamie's Italian to Australia.
Chop House is the one who's now owned by the Solotel.
That's right.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so Kingsley and I cut the lock off the front door and personally cleaned it out of all the rubbish.
Wow, well done. Okay, that's how you started the hospitality career here in Australia.
Yes. So I was here from 2007 to 2012. And when I left, the business was in the process of courting offers to sell and ultimately sold to Keystone Hospitality. 20
years ago, did you know that you will end up sitting in this chair, not exactly in this chair, but in your office chair, and will be lobbying for the industry? Is it something you were looking for?
No, I would never have expected that I would have become a lobbyist or an advocate for anything, let alone hospitality. But it is now my passion, and I'm as passionate about being an advocate and a lobbyist as I was about going into the hospitality industry.
Do you feel like you're more a voice for the business or for the workers?
Well, industry associations are the voice of the business, and the business employs workers and employees. So ultimately, while we do speak for the business, we understand the needs that businesses have for employment.
How often those interests do not align?
Well, look, ultimately, it's about compromise and helping to make those interests align as much as possible.
Yeah. What is the main policy you're now working on?
We have 3 policy pillars: migration/workforce, industrial relations, and tax. And really anything that falls into those 3 pillars becomes what we advocate for.
How important is for you to actually amend the current government policy for migration?
Look, there have been a lot of people enter Australia over the last few years, many of which have gone into aged care, hospitality, and retail as far as jobs. Figures that I got in early 2025 showed that as recently as 2022, migrants, 671,000 migrants held jobs in hospitality over 2022. So that's not at any given time. That's held jobs throughout the year. So, even if you have that, it means that about a third to 33 to 40% of the workforce is migrant, temporary or permanent. We find that that's pretty standard for the hospitality industry. Walk into any hospitality business, even where we're doing this podcast now, almost all of the individuals that are working behind the coffee bar behind us are working holidaymakers from other countries. And so that's very common. So really getting the blend right, ensuring that whatever legislation stays in effect or comes into effect ensures that the industries that need those working holidaymakers, international students, and skilled migrants are able to get those.
Do you find that is the statistics slightly skewed? If you're looking at the back of the house and front of the house, would you find that Australians are predominantly focusing on working in the front of the house as a managers, as a waiters, but in the back of the house, predominantly the major workforce still from overseas?
What we find is that the free TAFE throughout the country has not necessarily improved over the past, let's say, decade. It has not improved the commencements, the in-training, and the completion in the food trades. And that's, the fault. I don't want to use the word fault, but that's the fault of both the system and the industry, as the food trades continue to be a challenging industry to recruit Australians into, given that the current generation just has so many other tech jobs in IT and gig jobs that they can take that are less manual than working in a kitchen.
Yeah. What is your view on the trend in the hospitality industry? Do you think it will change in a number of years with the new technology, with innovations, with AI, with robotics? Or you think the industry will not change much?
Well, I always give this example. Two examples. One is you look down and you look at your shirt, you see a button. Now, that button's been a button for thousands of years. We've tried everything. We've tried hooks and fasteners and Velcro, zippers, you name it. But we've always come back to a button. Or this glass of water, this vessel that this water's in. I mean, we've tried all kinds of things. Straws hooked to your back and all kinds of stuff. But we've settled back on this vessel. So I think while technology can help with things like booking, ordering, time and attendance, accounting, AI for your marketing and advertising and social media, and even some improvements in the kitchen, I think that diners, in Australia at least, want a server to approach the table and to give them insights into the menu, into what the restaurant's specialties are, and that diners tend to want to hold a paper menu. Many businesses have tried digital and iPad and QR code menus, but for the most part, the diner has that lowest common denominator of the button or the glass, and that's what they would like, and we expect that will stay the same.
Okay, but if you look back 10 years ago, we didn't have Uber. We didn't have wireless earphones, and I would never assume or think that one day we wouldn't have cabs. We will be accustomed to wearing wireless earphones, but it happened. Is there still a chance that people will change their habits?
I think that we will get to the lowest common denominator. I think we will get to a point where you have technologied something as much as it can be technologied, and it will improve the customer experience because you'll have data based upon that particular customer, and you'll be able to predict what they might want to eat or drink, and make their experience more meaningful. But ultimately, I don't foresee that we'll have robots wandering around restaurants taking orders in the foreseeable future.
What is not foreseeable future? How far it is?
Well, look, we've been taking orders in restaurants really the same way for, let's call it, hundreds of years. A paper menu with symbols printed on it and prices, and we've learned about menu engineering, so directing people to particular items that are higher contribution margin. So we know how better to direct consumers to maximize profits for restaurants. But ultimately, I think that it will take a much longer period of time for us to reset the restaurant experience. Probably decades or even longer than that.
Yeah. I'll ask you a very controversial question. With Trump being elected, do you think it will affect the Australian economy much for the industry, hospitality industry?
There are smarter economists than me that can give you a better answer, but what I can say is that
I don't think any of the economists can give us the true answer. It's all guess. But you, with your finance background, you can look at the numbers and probably come up with an analytical conclusion.
I think you have to look to emotion at the moment. And emotionally, diners are looking at their stock portfolios, their super funds. They are listening to the RBA talk about, potentially not lowering interest rates in an emergency situation. Any uncertainty always affects discretionary spend, and hospitality, besides your morning coffee, can be seen as a discretionary spend. So I think that we'll probably see some volatility for the next 6 to 12 months as the world settles into the new normal of trade wars.
Yeah. Are you foreseeing inflation going up or down?
That's a great question. How long is a piece of string? It really just depends. When you put tariffs on items, that tends to put prices up. However, Australia doesn't have tariffs with many of its trading partners. And the 10% tariff that the US is at present imposing on Australia, that I think is frozen for the next 90 days, that likely won't really affect prices to the point of causing dramatic inflation. But it really depends on the RBA's moves.
But the problem is RBA believes that they can battle the inflation by increasing the interest rates rather than focusing maybe on the taxation.
Look, that is their blunt force tool, and that's the tool that they have in place. And many economists have often argued and offered other solutions, but that's what the RBA does. They raise and lower the bank rate, and that's the tool they use.
Is it something ARCA can do and lobby the RBA or not?
No, the RBA often can't be lobbied. However, they do have consultations, like, for example, the surcharge debate. We're part of that consultation process with the RBA. But the Board of Governors and the panel that determines the interest rates, that they typically aren't lobbied. They look at the data.
Okay. Where do you see ARCA in the next 5 years?
Continuing to grow membership and partnership, and continuing to have some more policy wins.
Yeah. Are you into working with other associations, or you predominantly want to become the one who is the voice for the industry?
Oh, look, the accommodation food service industry is the fifth largest employing industry in Australia, and the restaurant and cafe segment, as at 2024, is the largest employing segment of all the segments of all the industries in Australia. So ultimately, all the advocacy that anyone can do, we stand beside other organizations that advocate on behalf of both the segment, the industry, and business wider.
All right. A number of our followers are from hospitality industry. Would you give them a hope for the industry in the near future?
Australians love to eat out. So at any given time, 30 to 40% of meals, all meals in Australia, are eaten out of home. Pondering on what you do as a viewer or as a subscriber to this podcast, you probably have 3 or 4 coffees out per week, if not more. You probably are having 3 or 4 main meals out per week. Keep doing that. If you have to change where you eat, that's fine. Ultimately, we do expect that in this cost of living crisis and the uncertainty with the trade wars, that habits will shift on where. But ultimately, as long as consumers continue to dine out in some capacity, that the industry will continue to be resilient. That said, we do expect that an additional probably 10% of the industry will close in the next 12 months, and that is just due to the strong pressures and headwinds the industry is facing.
Do you think fine dining will be affected the most?
Ultimately, fine dining tends to be fairly resilient. The baby boomers and the Xers who bought homes decades ago, they tend to continue to feel wealthy.
Yeah.
And the short-term stock market swings and the short-term property volatility, that doesn't tend to affect their buying decisions.
Interesting. How to find the passion for the younger hospitality workers like you did and made it as a career?
Oh, look, all they have to do is ask their their managers, and if they're in a small or large group, their head office team, what range of salary do you make? And you'll find that, GMs in restaurants are on six figures, 1 to 200,000 or more, and operations managers and head office employees of medium to large groups, they can make as much as $500,000. There's definitely a career in it. Same with chefs and executive chefs and group executive chefs and F&B managers in hotels. It's certainly a rewarding career. And one that translates out well to many other industries.
Do you think it should be about the wages and money rather than passion and love? I think this industry evolves purely because of the emotions, what workers, chefs, managers bring, rather than them focusing on the wages.
I think they're both important. I think that the lifestyle and the work-life balance that used to exist in hospitality has shifted and changed. Many hospitality businesses march their employees out at 38 hours, and want to make sure that they have a good work-life balance. And certainly, with more modern technologies, businesses are much more efficient in terms of the day-to-day work that both front of house and back of house hospitality workers have. Certainly, if you have a passion for hospitality, nothing's going to stop you from working in the industry. But to keep you in the industry and to keep you interested, that's where salary and pay comes into play.
You just mentioned the 38 hours work. Do you think this number can stack up the P&L? Because predominantly hospitality industry, people are working way more than 38 hours a week. And recently we had a number of allegations that chefs, managers would work way more. And unfortunately, it's not only in the hospitality industry, but hospitality industry was hit the most. But again, if we start employing people and pay them by the award, is there any gross margin?
According to IBIS Worlds, cafes make 3.3% profit. Restaurants make 3.8%. Pubs are on 6.7%, and takeaway is on about 8.1%. There is margin. Certainly, it is not the profit margins of hospitality businesses around the world, but through the Fair Work Ombudsman and the Fair Work Commission's work over really the past 5+ years, those underpayments are certainly coming into line, and the industry is not under as much of a spotlight as it was before, and works every day to improve. And there's many great companies like Tanda that have come out with time and attendance and software and guides to ensure that businesses are paying the correct amount, and businesses are taking those up, and they are using technology to improve. And look, ultimately, there are many businesses that do stick to that 38 hours or 45 on a salaried contract, gone are the days of working 60, 70 hours for a salary in a restaurant or a cafe. It just doesn't happen anymore.
Just very interesting. To make 3.3% a year sounds like better to keep the money in the bank, which can pay you slightly more.
Oh, look, it depends on volume. So that's profit margin as a percentage. There are many industries that have low profit margin and high turnover.
Yep.
So really, and that isn't normalizing the owner or the owner's family working in the business, which is extremely common in hospitality. Typically, the owner of a restaurant or cafe or pub, they work in the business, so they're paying themselves a wage. They're potentially eating and drinking in their business. So that is the profit of the entity.
Yeah.
It might not necessarily be the economic benefit that you get as the owner or the manager of a business.
Interesting. I would love to have another chat with you in 6-7 months. We can look back and see how the industry changed. Elections are coming. What is your bet?
Oh, you would be a fool to bet on the election at the moment.
You as a lobbyist?
Anyone. A fool and his money are soon parted. Even the betting apps, as recently as a couple of months ago, had the outcome wildly different than it is now, as far as as far as betting goes. So what I would say is it will likely be a minority government, which will make things very difficult over the next 3 years, as either side has to make deals that they might not normally have made previously. And my personal opinion is that there will be major taxation changes to assets versus income.
Very good answer. What is your personal preference?
Policy, not politics. So, the policies of both sides and even the independents are leaving the hospitality industry just a little bit hungry. One side has offered a bit more to the industry, but ultimately we are the hardest hit industry during this cost of living and this tariff crisis. So, we would like to see more from both sides and from the independents in order to ensure that another 10% doesn't close in the next 12 months.
Very good answer again. I think you need to move to the politics.
I think I enjoy lobbying also. I don't think I want to give up my U.S. citizenship.
Okay.
So unless I stick to local or state, I think that's it for me.
Yeah. Wes, great chat. Thank you very much. We all learned a lot. In 6-7 months, we're going to get back and look at the industry, how it's changed.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's good to see you now.
Good
Thank you.
Thank you.